Okay, so yeah, time for demo-ish. We're gonna go through a bit faster just so we can cover uh, three kind of realms and in a way that will be helpful for you moving forward. There are important considerations before you begin to create your digital content that we want to point out. And a lot of this is to honestly save the creator some time because we recognize accessibility is work. And we don't want to minimize the fact that it can be a lot of work. We just want to emphasize it will be a lot less if you are considering it from the get-go. So the first thing we want to think about is what purpose will the content serve to those who have access or the intended audience? So is it going to be serving to convey essential information? Is it going to be posted publicly, like a website or social media? Is it going to be circulated for review and engagement via emails? Or are you collaborating on a document? Will it serve to strictly act as a visual or presentation aid? So for example, this PowerPoint right now, and it's going to be live, or are we going to record and post and circulate it elsewhere post-presentation? So this will be distributed after. So we want to make sure that it's accessible if we're distributing it. And then the last thing, will it serve to act as a tool for course note-taking or post-presentation support? So are you going to be sending it ahead of a class or a workshop so people will have access to that file? And why is that important to consider? As I mentioned, and Kate's mentioned, people who are receiving this content, they're going to have fundamentally different levels of access to the content being distributed when you consider several variables, including the file type. So is it a Word doc, a PowerPoint, a video file, PDF? What's the intended purpose? So is it review, interact, listen to, edit, as well as the environment? So is it asynchronous, synchronous? And all of that will tie into how someone's going to access it. We can't control every single variable, but we're going to do our best. And the way that I would say most individuals working in digital accessibility, and it's a method Kate and I have adapted because we like it so much, is to consider the 7 core skills for accessible digital content. There's 8 bubbles here because it was symmetrical, but often video and audio are combined when listing out the 7 core skills. So these include headers, lists, fonts and links, tables, alternative text, color contrast, video, and audio. So what are we going to look at today? We're going to look at Microsoft Word, Outlook, and a very limited amount of social media. So compliance, we also want to outline, does not always mean it's accessible. So even if you meet all of the WCAG guidelines, you might not be fully accessible because everyone is going to be interacting with the document from a different place. So it's really important to keep that in mind. There isn't an automatic checker that will give you a complete certainty that you won't have to still make an accommodation. But if you're conscious about designing with accessibility in mind, you're going to reduce the amount of accommodation requests that come in. And we also, this is a favorite example of mine about how visual formatting guides how we process information. So this is just a template from Microsoft Word for a newspaper. And you can see here, there's a very large first header. You've got a subtitle, each little article. It's very clear what belongs to what article. There's a picture caption. The visuals are pulling you through the newspaper in a logical way. And if we were to translate this to text with no semantics, so that's what we typically refer to as kind of the structure behind the text and images. If there isn't semantic formatting with that, we end up kind of what I have here, just a block of text. It wouldn't even be in columns, it would just be a block of text. So this is the text equivalent. And if someone's interacting with it with assistive technology, they're not going to know that newspaper is the header. They're not going to know that there's a photo. They're not going to know that the article is related to the photo. So by adding all of that semantic information, so structuring the document and adding alternative text, we want to try to make an equitable experience to that visual interaction with this newspaper article. So the first thing we're going to talk about are heading styles and lists. And as Kate mentioned, feel free to pop questions in as we go. And Kate will let me know if I don't notice the chat pop up. So headings, you probably have seen them before in Word documents. It's over in the styles section. This is the Mac's screenshot of the Mac interface. If you have Windows, it will actually typically have styles underneath. It's a bit easier to navigate, in my opinion. But headings, there's a couple I would say 3 main things you would like to consider when using them. And that headings should always be used to give a document structure and navigation tools. With headings in a document, someone will be able to use their assistive technology to jump through the document. They'll know how many heading 1s there are. They'll know how many heading 2s, and they can navigate by section instead of having to read the entirety of, for example, on the previous slide, entire block of text just to consume it all. It's going to give them much more control. So it's very important that they are used. You also want to use them in numerical order or logical order. So if you have a heading style 1, the next style should be 2. You never want to skip and say go heading 1 to 3. And you also want to create them with the tools that are within the software, not just by creating larger text or changing the color. So within Word, it's very important that you use heading 1, not just changing it to be a bigger font. And I will caution you, Word has 2 heading styles that kind of masquerade as headings called title and subtitle. Do not use those 2. Unfortunately, they don't have any semantic information associated with them. They're just there kind of as a visual styling. I really wish they would remove them because it's very confusing for a lot of people. And I also often associate title with heading 1, subtitle heading 2. So I want to caution you to not use those if you actually want it to be part of your navigation. Another thing that's nice is when you have headings, it allows you to create your table of contents automatically, and you can retroactively format documents very quickly if those styles are associated. Kind of in the same note as formatting, next to the heading styles section, there's our paragraph section in Word, and that's where we access how to create lists. And this is quite simple, and you probably already do it, but you want to make sure that you're using the paragraph tools to create lists, not just adding little dashes or symbols. And the reason we want that is if a list is present and it just has a symbol, someone with assistive technology is not going to know it's a list. Often we get that information visually. Usually it's indented. There's the symbols, either bullets or numbers. And if you don't use the paragraph tool, it's not going to let anyone using assistive tech know. So if you're using a screen reader and you can't see the screen, you're just going to be interacting with it. And often a lot of symbols aren't read as we intended, depending on the symbol, by assistive technology. It's typically the very literal meaning of the symbol. So we want to make sure that they're created unordered lists. You can use the bullet points list, and ordered lists should use the numbered list. This is also very important, especially with large numbered lists, because it will automatically update your numbers. I've seen them done by hand and remediated several documents where the lists, it was pages and pages of numbers that were created by hand. So I want to emphasize this will benefit you as well. Thankfully, a lot of accessibility tips overlap with productivity. Any questions about heading styles and lists before we move on? All right, so the next thing we're going to quickly talk about are accessible font styles. And I will preface this with this is digital font recommendations, not print font. So if you've seen before, print fonts, serif fonts are typically recommended. Oh, I moved that a little, sorry. We aren't going to recommend it in this case because of digital context. So fonts that are recommended to use include sans serif fonts like Calibri, Arial, and Open Sans. I will preface this again with system fonts are recommended. So fonts that come pre-installed with the computer. I would use those if it's a document you're distributing because you know that it's going to appear as you intended when someone else opens it. If you use a font you've installed and someone else doesn't have, it's going to pick a random font from their system, and it may skew how you've created your document and impact that visual interpretation. For Word documents and emails, a font size of over 12 or larger is recommended, and you can use bolded text to emphasize. If you're using bolded text, it will be picked up by assistive technology like a screen reader. Unfortunately, italicized is not. So if you're doing an emphasis, make sure it's bolded. Another recommendation is either 1.5 minimum line spacing or paragraph spacing that's sufficient. So this has 1.5 minimum line spacing. This is one thing that falls under the 2.1 WCAG guidelines. And I would say if I had more than one kind of block of text, I would probably swap to having more paragraph spacing in that case. This is something where there's a bit more wiggle room. And because it's something I would say that falls under cognitive disabilities, that there's multiple interpretations of what is best in that moment. So fonts we want to avoid using are serif fonts, So fonts like Times New Roman, because they have the little feet in a digital context, especially for individuals with reading disabilities like dyslexia, the letters can kind of blend together and it can become difficult to read. Italic fonts or script fonts like Freestyle Script, compressed fonts like Bernard MD Condensed, uneven line weights like Broadway, decorative fonts like Algerian. You can kind of see all of these that the letters aren't really uniform and it's not going to be read as easily. We also want to avoid using underlined text, and I will explain why in 2 slides. Strike through will not be picked up by assistive technology. So I always see strike through being used to cancel things. Make sure if you're using that, you also have in brackets canceled, because that's not going to be picked up by assistive technology. And then, as I mentioned before, complex symbols. I do have a very large Excel sheet of how symbols are read by NVDA, a very popular screen reader. So if you're curious about which symbols and what symbols are read and what it says when it interacts with that symbol, I can definitely share that. But a lot of time, especially in the science context where math is involved, it'll be in a very complex equation, and it's not at all how the instructor intended that symbol to be read. Alrighty. Any more questions about font? Alrighty. So this is kind of where we're going to talk briefly about social media and camel case and structuring posts. So camel case is the art of writing hashtags with the first letter of each word with a capital. It makes it much easier for everyone, but especially those for learning disability and a screen reader, to understand what words are in that hashtag. When it's all one big giant word with no capitals, screen readers might read every letter if it's not easily identifiable. And if someone's looking at it visually, when they're very long, it becomes very hard to read and they can be misinterpreted. I've seen some poor ones where I think it was the British singer Susan Boyle, I think it was, had an album party, and it was quite inappropriate, the hashtag, that it could be interpreted that way. So that also helps with that. So camel case is great. And then structuring posts, we want to put any links or hashtags at the end of the message so that the content can be consumed before interacting with either a long link or with your hashtags. And it's very important for users using a screen reader or who have a learning disability. And we also want to emphasize that the message should be simple, free of typos and logical. And you want to avoid the use of acronyms or complex language. So the link to Hemingway app that I linked before, that's a great way to check your reading order. Typically with plain language, you want to aim for a reading level of grade 5 for public audiences. So that's just something to keep in mind. Alrighty. Any questions about camel case and structuring your social media posts? Perfect. All right, so we're going to talk about links now and why we save underlined text for hyperlinks. So there's 3 kind of big rules for hyperlinks, and that they should be the only underlined text in your document, they should be unique, and they should be descriptive. So the reason we want it to be the only underlined text is so that it's visually obvious that this is a link. If you're underlining other text and you have things that are underlined, it can be very confusing, and someone may think that a link's broken. So we really just want to avoid duplicating that formatting. Unique in that if we have 2 links, and let's say learn more on a website is very common, where someone will have a link saying learn more. If that learn more link is it's there twice and it's 2 different links, that's very confusing for individuals, and it can be especially confusing if you're using a screen reader. So if we have the same text, it should be linking to the same place. So every link should have a unique text associated with it. And the last thing we want to think about is that our links are descriptive. And the reason this is also great is this removes the need for either a tooltip I see referenced in Word products or alternative text for a link or a link title. So if a link is descriptive, there's no need for any additional text to give to individuals using an assistive technology. So a good link is Reed McMaster's latest daily news article. Apologies, I can't English anymore today, apparently. So this link, it's quite clear the purpose of the link. It's unique. I don't have another link on the page like that. And I know if I click this, it's going to take me to the latest daily news article. Another great link, emails are actually, it's recommended to keep them as the email. So I have email Blackwood, my email at mcmaster.ca for assistance with accessible documents. And within PowerPoint, and I'll quickly show you because it is the same in Word, you can actually format it so that the link takes you to this. It's a bit different in Windows. You want to have a mail to : within the link. Mac takes care of it, which I guess is good. But that will directly open someone's email client, and it makes it very easy to navigate and contact that person. An example of a poor link is this giant COVID-19 information link. This is a lot of symbols. Again, it's all lowercase. So someone with assistive technology, it may read some of the words, it may read none of it. It may just produce a bunch of letters, which is very difficult to navigate. And this is kind of tame compared to some of the things that come out of SharePoint and OneDrive in our environment now. So we really want to make sure that everything is formatted as much as possible. All righty, I see maybe a question.
We have excellent questions, and also maybe a comment. It's interesting because I'm reflecting on Lynn's comments about not as much of an explicit focus on cognitive disability, but it is interesting how much, it's not explicit, it should be made more explicit, how many of these techniques help to lessen cognitive load. So, formatting good links, having legible text, having structured headings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just wish they were a little bit more explicit about it, because it is so true that when you structure your content to be more plain language and just more readable in general, it lessens cognitive load, which is helpful for folks with cognitive disabilities. So Lori's got a question. I think we've both got suggestions for this, Jess, about suggestions for conferences or events that typically use acronyms for hashtags and their promotion. I might say, Lori, acronyms are the devil. We all know that acronyms are terrible, but they're so common in, like, anyone who's familiar with linguistics will know that if you've got sort of a register for a profession where everybody's familiar with the lingo, and it becomes a little bit exclusive because only folks who are in that field know the lingo, it's to the exclusion of literally everyone else. So where folks are using acronyms, my suggestion would be spell out the acronym in the hashtag and then put the acronym as the second hashtag would be sort of the way to do it. And Jess and I have an example of that later on. And it just, and use your camel case. When you're spelling out that acronym, it's a perfect opportunity to use your camel case. You can list multiple hashtags, but then you don't run into that, what the heck does this acronym even mean situation. I don't know, Jess, if you had additional thoughts about.
Well, it's pretty good. Yeah, Mac is, in general, is horrendous. I think every unit has an acronym title.
All organizations that are gigantic have this problem. All fields that are gigantic have this problem. It's so ironic, Lynn. Speech language pathology is terrible for acronyms. How true. I studied linguistics, so I find that hilarious. So Whitney's question about, are screen readers built in or would these be added separately? Just curious. Both, actually, Whitney. So Jess, maybe you want to mention some of the more popular external screen readers that folks use typically.
So NVDA is one I mentioned previously. It is free. So if you wanted to download it, I will warn you that if you're not used to interacting with the screen reader, it's pretty cognitively overwhelming. I only can use one for a short amount of time at a time because of my status of disability. I props to individuals who are so proficient in it, because it can be a lot of auditory things to process at a time. JAWS is another very popular one. It is not free, but it is very good. So that's, and if you have funding for it, that's another option. There are built-in ones. Mac is, I would say, one of the pioneers. I wouldn't say it was out of the goodness of their hearts, but because it's good business to be accessible. So even Siri is an example, I would say, of something that has arisen from assistive tech, but there's voiceover. Google Chrome has Chromebox. Like there are many built-in, Microsoft as well. And I'm wondering if PowerPoint also has it, but there's a read aloud in Word. If you go to review in Word next to the check accessibility with our Office 365 versions, you have to make sure you're updated. There is a read aloud option. Don't see it in PowerPoint. That might be a Mac problem too. This is my work computer. Ironically, Mac, and well, not ironically, but Mac has many missing features with our Windows and Office suite. I think it's a company beef problem. So if I ever mention a feature that you don't notice on your Mac within the asynchronous training that we're sending out, that is probably why. Unfortunately, it's something we can't really account for, but we try to mention it when we do know that it exists. So there's lots of options. Dragon Naturally Speaking is another one that individuals can use to navigate hands-free. And there's also keyboard navigation. Like it's not always that complicated. Keyboard nav is one of the easiest ways to test if something's been made accessible. And I'll quickly show you on this slide. If I tab through, it's going to go through in a logical reading order because I made sure it was logical.
You might have to do that again a little bit slowly,
yeah.
Jess.
So if I tab the first time, it takes me to my title, links and social media. Then it takes me to the content on the left of the screen. So it takes me to my text, my first image, second image, the last image. So there's many ways that you can check. And another way would just be highlighting things in a Word document as well. It'll tell you if the reading order is what you thought it would. And the reading order is how that assistive technology will present content to its user.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Great questions so far, folks. And so Jess was just highlighting some testing techniques for screen reader compatibility, which is really helpful because typically screen reader compatibility is the baseline compatibility for other assistive technologies. So it's not assured that if it's screen reader accessible, it's accessible for every other type of disability, but it's a really fantastic foundation. Yeah. That's the foundation.
And screen readers are what most of the WCAG guidelines have been based off of. All right. So we're going to quickly talk about links in social media because obviously big long links, when you can't format them and embed them. Zoom, for example, I haven't been able to embed a single link with descriptive text. And I apologize for that. It's annoying to say the least. I have asked a couple of times in the past couple of years to have a Mac link shortening service. I'm going to keep asking because I think it's something that would be really beneficial because bit.ly.com is a great link shortener, but especially with the current climate regarding internet security and what's happening overseas, people don't trust bit.ly links at all times. And I would recommend not trusting a link unless you know it's from a trusted source. Please do not open things right now and scan your computers and keep things updated. But yeah, bit.ly is a great way. You can create custom links, which is also very helpful for our International Day of Persons with Disabilities in December. I created, I think it was like something December 3rd. And it made it very quick, easy to type. It was as descriptive as I could be in that context, but it's a way to get around that. Another thing that I see quite often are using link services like Linktree. If you have access to your own web environment, I would recommend actually making a link page on your website so that you have control over those analytics and traffic. So that's more a social media marketing recommendation. But Linktree is great because it lets you have all your links in one page. If you have a subscription, you can customize it a bit more. And it makes it a lot easier for people to navigate. And another thing, as Kate had earlier, is a QR code. So it's creating a visual kind of representation of that link. I have one linked here, qrcode-generator.com. I really recommend using this one because it doesn't redirect your link. You want to avoid using any QR code. Like if you open up a QR code, and for a second it takes you somewhere and then you're now at the final destination. You want to avoid using services that do that. Again, internet security, but also for analytics sake, it's better if it just takes it right to where you want it to go. Any questions about that? I think I see at least one question about icons.
Yes. I'm just laughing because I can tell Jess has just been in some pretty serious security training in the last.
Yeah, I was in an all-day security training last week.
So Lori's question about using icons in social media posts. Yes.
Yeah, so emojis, or icons. I think that I just want to clarify, emojis are icons. Okay, emojis, yes. They do have an alternative text, I think now for most of them, right, Kate? I'm under that assumption. They do add, I think Kate's frozen, or I'm frozen. I think Kate's frozen. They did just add new emojis last week, but yeah, I believe most emojis are okay, because they do have kind of a more a kind of plain text alternative. Often when you paste it from another service, sometimes it'll display like that. But I just want to confirm, Whitney, is it Kate or me? I think I see you moving.
I can see you and hear you.
Okay,
so
perfect. I think Kate just dropped off. Okay, good. Alrighty. So any questions about links in social media? And we'll jump into alternative text. And hopefully Kate comes back, but I will jump into alt text because this is something that it's fair. It can be intimidating. So alternative text in Outlook, alternative text in general, I'll start by prefacing and reiterating what Kate said. It's the text alternative for visual. And there's on the side here, we have 1, 2, and 3. There's kind of usually 3 steps I go through when I'm interacting with an image and I'm trying to decide what the alternative text should be. The first is, does this image need alternative text or is it decorative? So if I'm creating a pretty brochure and I have a background image, is that image adding anything aside from a visual? Is it conveying meaning? If it's not, then it can be marked as decorative. And typically within the software, there will be a way to do that. So within Microsoft PowerPoint, you can see here, we have an example of a poster sent via email as the alternative text. And if I want to mark it as decorative, it's just a little checkbox. I do want this alternative text in this case because it is an illustrative example. So we're going to keep it. And this is a good example of some images might only need 1 to 2 lines of description because I don't want you, it's not essential that people interacting with this PowerPoint know that this was the disability and graduate school discussion. We want you to know that this is an example of a very text heavy image that got sent via email because we'll get it from our media production services. So it's something that will need a plain text alternative. And this is the number 3. Some images are going to be too complex for the alternative text kind of box over here. Alternative text, you don't want it to be more than 1 to 2 lines. And if it's something that's very complex, we will typically say, example of a poster sent via email. And then the next sentence will be full description or plain text alternative available below, above. You just want to specify so that the user using assistive technology knows where to look to get that full alternative text option. Alrighty. So quickly on social media, thankfully most platforms now have made editing alternative text much easier. Twitter is the only one where you need to be thinking about it before you tweet because you can't edit it after the fact and you can't edit tweets. So you want to make sure while you're posting that you edit that alternative text, and they've given a lot of space, thankfully, on Twitter as well for that alternative text because you only have a certain number of characters in your tweet. So this is probably the only place where if it's a big poster that you're tweeting, put all of that text, every text like letter that shows up on that poster, put it in that description because otherwise you'll have to do multiple tweets replying with that alternative text, which is not the best experience for someone trying to get an understanding of what's in that photo. Facebook, you can change the alternative text when you're posting. And it typically will it thinks there's a dog in here, which kind of made me laugh because there is not a dog in this Animal Crossing screenshot, but it will try to do its best. Same with Microsoft products. Word will try to generate, which is fine, but you want to make sure what it generates is what's actually in that image. Alternative text is not something at this point that the AI is capable of creating meaningful alternative text for in all cases. So I have Flora, Bertha, and Pashmina hosting a birthday party for Jessica in Animal Crossing, because this was right after the pandemic and this was the only birthday party I was going to be having. And in this case, it's Goldie the dog examining flowers while holding a book in Animal Crossing. Instagram, you can edit the alternative text either before or after posting. This is a phone screenshot, so it's write alternative text in the advanced settings. You can also do it from the desktop version if it's something you're wanting to do. Alrighty. Unfortunately, I will mention Instagram as well and Facebook stories. You cannot add alternative text to Facebook and Instagram stories at this time. It's one of the least accessible social media environments. And also, well, mainly because of that alternative text factor. So if you do have text, try to also include an audio alternative. And if there is audio, you want to make sure that that video you're posting is captioned. So yeah, Whitney, the generated alternative text from Microsoft, I would say it can be rough what it makes. I always double check. Sometimes I'll give it a shot. I think with this one, like when I asked it to, what is this image? It did pretty well. So it's an individual typing on a computer. So if we try again, let's see what it makes. A person working on a computer. So that's pretty great. And in this case, I would leave that. I would get rid of that because we don't, and now that we're verifying, we don't need it there. But in this case, I typically use images like this as visual filler. So I would mark it as decorative. There's Kate. I borrowed this from the CanChild website because it's, I frequently reference the knowledge to action process still in my work today. It's one of my favorite frameworks. But this is also a great diagram of where it's very complex and we wouldn't be able to adequately describe this in 1 to 2 sentences. So frequently in social media, we used to see this square bracket method. So I could, underneath the image, do image description, add full description here. So I would throw it there, or you can link out to the full description. And I actually have this linked to the CanChild website where I borrowed this image from. And they've done a great work at describing what this image is and what the process is. So that's another way, instead of creating your own, to borrow it from either a website. If it's a scientific figure, you could borrow and cite the figure description. Figure descriptions are a great example of kind of alternative text in its in a scientific environment. Yeah. Any questions about alternative text? And I see Kate's back.
So sorry, like not only an internet outage, but also now my computer's installing system updates. So sorry to be joining on my phone. There doesn't seem to be anything in the chat though, Jess, that I can tell.
Perfect.
So far.
Yeah. Alternative text can be very difficult. I would also recommend, if you're posting something and you're not the subject matter expert, go to someone who is to create that alternative text, because I frequently am making content for very scientific things. And although I have a science background, I'm not a master of all scientific topics, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to create, especially in a learning context, meaningful alternative text to suit that learning goal for a student. So don't be afraid to go to that content expert, even just to verify, hey, I did this alternative text. Is this what you intended it to be?